In the heart of the Pacific Ocean, a mysterious island that for centuries remained isolated from the rest of the world stands as a testament to an ancient people of whom no trace remains. We are talking about the very famous Rapa Nui, known for its enormous and enigmatic statues, which over the years has inspired extraordinary theories and hypotheses. As we will see, however, the incredible statues on this isolated strip of land are not the only mystery. Much more is hidden in the history and in the artifacts found on this tiny island, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of ocean. Well, before we start this fascinating journey, if you haven't done so yet, we invite you to subscribe to the channel to support our work and not miss our new videos. On April 5th, 1722, during Easter Sunday, the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen spotted the island of Rapa Nui for the first time. He named it Easter Island in honor of the day it was discovered. Jacob Roggeveen had been sent by the Dutch West India Company with the goal of finding the legendary Terra Australis, but instead he discovered this remote Pacific island. The natives warmly welcomed Jacob Roggeveen and his men, offering them food and gifts, but due to a misunderstanding, a conflict arose between them, and some natives were killed by the Dutch sailors out of fear of an attack.
The natives were very friendly, offering fruit, roots, and poultry. They were happy to trade their goods for our striped linen, with which they seemed very satisfied. A conflict broke out when one of our men was attacked while the natives tried to take his musket. Some natives were killed during the shooting that followed.
Roggeveen notes in his diary a curious detail about the physical appearance of the inhabitants of this remote island.
The inhabitants of this island showed a variety of physical features. Some had blonde or red hair, a surprising characteristic that aroused our curiosity.
How could the inhabitants of a remote island in the Pacific Ocean have physical features completely different from any population near them? How did they arrive in that remote place? This is an intriguing first clue we'll revisit later. But while Roggeveen describes the geography of the island and the physical appearance of the inhabitants of Rapa Nui in his diaries, the first to tell us about the statues was James Cook during his visit to the island in 1774.
On the east side, near the sea, they encountered 3 stone platforms, or rather their ruins. On each of them they had erected 4 of those large statues, but all of them had fallen. All except one had been broken by the fall or somehow defaced. Mr. Wales measured this one and found that it was 15 feet long and 6 feet wide at the shoulders. Each statue had on its head a large cylinder of red stone, perfectly worked into a round shape.
Cook was impressed by the size and number of artifacts and by the advanced techniques the island's inhabitants had used to carve and position them. Some of the largest statues were still standing, and Cook observed that the shadow of one of them was enough to protect a group of about 30 people from the sun. From these very first observations, we can draw some important conclusions. The first is that the inhabitants of this remote island show very particular physical characteristics: blonde or red hair and fair skin. They are certainly not peculiar to that region. The second element is that the statues described by Cook appear abandoned, and many of them are lying on the ground. Today we know that Easter Island is home to at least 900 Moai statues, whose height ranges from a modest 1 meter up to an impressive 10 meters, with some of them reaching a weight of 82 tons, 3 times heavier than the megalithic stones of Stonehenge. These colossal figures were once thought to be just giant heads without bodies. They have also revealed a surprising truth. In 2017, a team of researchers conducted excavations that uncovered the torsos and waists of the statues that were buried in the ground. This discovery revealed the complexity and skill of the ancient inhabitants of this island, but it raised a fascinating question. Why do the statues appear to be buried? From the study of the Moai statues, it emerged that they were not intentionally buried by the ancient inhabitants of the island. Rather, the statues were gradually covered by soil due to natural processes of soil deposition, erosion, and other geological and climatic phenomena. Historians estimate that the statues are about 800 years old, but this contradicts the timeline required for their natural burial. Taking into account the island's climatic conditions, the rate of soil accumulation was found to be about 0.5 millimeters per year. Considering that the statues are buried on average about 7 meters deep, if we accept this estimate, it would have taken about 15,000 years for their natural burial. Clearly, these are speculative estimates, but there is no doubt that they raise an interesting question. Who could have built these extraordinary artifacts in such a remote era? But this isn't the only curious aspect. Another interesting aspect is that the Moai statues are made in a style
sta con teste sovradimensionate e corpi relativamente piccoli.
Hands are carved in relief along the sides of the statues, with the fingers extending downward to the abdomen. The fingers often meet at the level of the navel, a position that has been interpreted as symbolically significant by scholars. These features are consistent with Polynesian artistic traditions, where the navel is seen as a vital and symbolic center of the body. The long fingers pointing toward the navel could therefore represent a gesture of spiritual power or authority. But this is not a unique feature of Polynesian culture. Interestingly, if we go to the other side of the world, specifically to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we find statues with thin hands depicted close to the body and directed toward the navel. But that's not all. There's another surprising similarity. You can also notice it by observing the petroglyphs on the back of the Moai statues. In fact, these appear very similar to the carvings found at Göbekli Tepe. We talked about Göbekli Tepe in a previous video, and as we saw, the site is estimated to be about 12,000 years old. Could these similarities be more than a coincidence? The Moai statues of Easter Island are not the only mysterious artifacts present on this small and remote island. In fact, if we go to the southwestern part of the island near the international airport, we find the megalithic walls of Vinapu. The walls of Vinapu, built with perfectly cut stone blocks fitted together without mortar, show a technical sophistication that could suggest an evolution of construction techniques over time. Some archaeologists believe that this type of construction may represent an advanced phase of the island's culture. If we look at the details of these incredible structures, we can't help but notice that these structures are identical to other walls.
Megalitici sparsi per il mondo, come ad esempio quelli di Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman e Ollantaytambo in Perù, o a quelli presenti in Egitto e addirittura in Giappone.
Despite this incredible similarity, historians and archaeologists claim that there is no connection between South America and Easter Island, let alone with other parts of the world, such as Egypt and Japan. But if we go to Latin America, we find another very curious similarity with the Moai statues, and strange figures found on the cliffs of Peru, which are attributed to the Chachapoya culture, a lost civilization about which we know very little, but which is believed to predate the Incas by many centuries. In 1864, Father Eugène Hérault, a French missionary during his visit to Easter Island, noticed for the first time some tablets engraved with very peculiar symbols. The missionary asked the local men what those strange inscriptions meant, and he discovered that they were called Rongorongo, a Rapa Nui term that means to speak or to recite. Although these symbols seem to represent an unknown language, they still have not been deciphered to this day. Initially, this discovery did not attract the attention of scholars, but when in 1869 these tablets reached Tapano Yausen, the Bishop of Tahiti, he recognized their importance and made them known to the entire academic world. Over the years, several researchers have tried to decipher these strange symbols, and some of them have noticed a particular similarity with another enigmatic language that is still undeciphered, a language that was found in another mysterious place, Mohenjo-Daro, in Pakistan, which is part of one of the oldest civilizations in the world, a civilization that, according to some, is even older than the Sumerian one, and which is known as the Indus Valley Civilization. Both languages use pictograms, even though the symbols appear different, and in both cases the exact function of the writing system, whether logographic, phonetic, or mnemonic, is still uncertain. The geologist Robert Schoch, while analyzing the tablets, tried to decipher the Rongorongo language, and he came to a surprising conclusion.
Inspired by my wife, Catherine Ulysses, who was the first to notice the connection, I concluded that the Rongorongo tablets from Easter Island, the surviving tablets, are copies of copies of copies. They record a major plasma event in the skies thousands of years ago. This, I believe, was the event that brought about the final end of the last ice age.
According to this hypothesis, each Rongorongo symbol could represent a concept or a complex idea, rather than a single word or sound, and some pictograms and signs found on the tablets can be interpreted as symbolic representations. The symbols would also not simply describe earthly or everyday elements, but rather extraordinary astronomical events, such as a solar storm.
Solar storms,
caused by coronal mass ejections and other solar phenomena, have significant effects on Earth, including climate changes and natural disasters. This interpretation obviously implies that astronomical knowledge of celestial events was of great importance to the culture of Rapa Nui, so much so that it was immortalized in their inscriptions and passed down through the years. According to this theory, around 10,000 BC during a solar storm, the impact of plasma on Earth would have caused dramatic environmental and geological effects, such as the heating and melting of rocks, fires of flammable materials, and the vaporization of bodies in water. These events would have triggered intense rainfall and a subsequent warming of the climate. Global warming would have eventually caused a rise in water levels, but not only that, the release of pressure exerted by the polar glaciers would have caused earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Ancient petroglyphs found worldwide would thoroughly document this catastrophe, and in the Rongorongo text, which would date back to around 10,000 BC, a date that would mark the end of the civilizations that had developed at that time. Robert Schoch, to formulate his theory, refers to the studies of Anthony Peratt, an authority on plasma phenomena, who studied the unstable formations that develop in high-energy electrical discharges, documenting them through their phases. These discharge forms, called Peratt instabilities, have been compared with ancient rock art, revealing surprising similarities. One of the main examples is the figure of the Squatter Man, a plasma configuration that appears when a linear electrical discharge is distorted by magnetic fields, creating characteristic shapes. Variations of this figure are found in ancient cultures all over the world, suggesting that it may have been a global phenomenon observed by ancient people. The Rongorongo tablets could therefore be a record of a catastrophic event related to solar plasma or geomagnetic storms. The glyphs studied by Schoch and his wife actually seem to transform from one shape to another, as if they were recording various stages of solar plasma radiation. The hypothesis of a global catastrophe that wiped out the advanced civilizations that had developed in a remote era is linked to many other clues that actually seem to place a disastrous event that shook our world in that time frame. As we've seen in other videos on the channel, even mainstream science seems to acknowledge that during that period, a catastrophic event struck the Earth, followed by a sudden cooling of the climate and then a warming. This change would have caused apocalyptic upheavals that would have devastated the planet and eventually led to a rise in ocean levels of about 100 meters. This event is recounted in the ancient mythologies of all the civilizations of the world. And although science acknowledges the possibility that a terrible upheaval may have actually occurred during that time frame, historians believe that myths and traditions referring to all this are just speculations by imaginative researchers. But now let's return to Rapa Nui, this extremely remote island discovered on an Easter Sunday 300 years ago, and try to answer the questions that remained open during our story. As we have seen, Rapa Nui, which in the Polynesian language means Great Island, contains incredible mysteries within it. We have seen the impressive Moai statues, the inexplicable megalithic walls of Vinapu, and we have analyzed the indecipherable Rongorongo script. In addition to this, we must add the curious accounts recorded by the first men who visited this remote island, who found themselves faced with a population with very diverse characteristics, which is far from the official account that claims the island's first inhabitants were Polynesians. The question that now needs to be answered is, what happened on Rapa Nui? Who were the founders of this ancient civilization? And above all, what brought them to such a remote and wild corner of the planet? Today, researchers have reconstructed the methods that were used to create the large statues. As the findings show, these were carved directly in the quarries, and once detached from the rock thanks to the use of wooden planks. According to reconstructions, these were then transported with wooden sleds, or perhaps following what is passed down by the tradition of the indigenous people, which claims that the statues walked to the place where they were placed. These were moved through the skillful use of ropes which, tied around the statue and pulled by men, made it sway and move until it reached the designated place. The limited vegetation and the scarcity of cultural resources on the island have also given rise to theories that this civilization may have self-destructed because of its cultural and social practices. Recent studies have actually revealed that, in the past, the island was abundantly covered with vegetation and tall palm trees. The palms and shrubs are believed to have been widely used to build small fishing boats and to erect the famous Moai statues for ritual religious purposes until they were completely wiped out. Some interpret the decline of this civilization as a warning about modern human behavior, which exploits the planet's resources indiscriminately, forgetting that these resources are limited and that once the ecosystem is compromised, it can no longer be repaired. These are certainly fascinating theories that prompt deep and timely reflections, but are we really sure that things happen this way? Or is this a view altered by the awareness and fears of our own time? Having analyzed the presented enigmas, our idea is that Easter Island might also tell us another story. A story that begins in a remote era where advanced civilizations existed and where the geography of our planet was very different from what it is today. The island might very well not have been an island, but could have been connected to the mainland, or it might have been less isolated than it is today. The accounts of those who first set foot in this region confirm that the island was inhabited by a population of citizens. This makes it possible that this was once a place inhabited by a multi-ethnic civilization, which could hardly have developed in a place so isolated from the rest of the world. Or that instead, this island was a place of refuge for all those who survived a global catastrophe. The discovery of the Venipu walls, which are believed to predate the Moai statues, shows an ancient knowledge that we find in other places on the planet and that can hardly be a coincidence, but rather they appear as evidence of engineering skills developed before the great catastrophe that wiped out the civilization that created them. The Moai statues and the religious cults that developed later on the island. Could they be later reworkings of ancient cults or bodies of knowledge that, over the years, have been forgotten and whose true reason or purpose has been lost? As evidence of this, one mystery still remains today: why the statues were placed in those specific locations that seem to have no clear logic. According to some reconstructions, the statues were meant to indicate and guard places where there were sources of fresh water. According to other reconstructions, however, the statues, which almost all face toward the interior of the island, would have had a ritual function meant to protect its inhabitants. It is clear, however, that whatever their original function was, today we have no trace of it left. But they probably didn't have it even in
generazioni che hanno preceduto gli attuali abitanti dell'isola, perché le statue, come abbiamo visto dalle testimonianze storiche, appaiono abbandonate da moltissimi anni.
Ours is clearly an analysis carried out following the historical and archaeological evidence found on the island and in the rest of the world. All clues that seem to tell a shared ancient history that, thanks to new studies, is becoming clearer and clearer. But at this point, we're curious to know your opinion. Who were the ancient people who built these extraordinary structures? Let us know in the comments what you think. And if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to the channel to support our work and not miss our new videos. See you in the next story.